It is 10 o'clock, and I want to make sure that we honor everyone's time. So welcome to our webinar on website basics today. I want to explain, my name is Michelle Morris. I work in the Center for Communication, and I'll explain a little bit the difference between a webinar and a meeting in case this is somebody's first webinar. Just to remind you that we cannot see you or hear you. So please, if you have questions, use the chat function. You can also use the Q&A function. The chat function is usually the one that especially other folks can check and see. I'll remind you that whenever you're typing in the chat function, there's a to line, and if it says to all panelists, then that information is only going to myself and to Jacob. But if you choose all panelists and all attendees, then everyone can see it. So if you want your question to be shared or discussion to be shared with everyone, please use to all panelists and attendees. And that's basically the difference between a webinar and a meeting. I am here as Jacob's producer today, so I will be your voice. I will put forward any questions that you have so he can stay focused on what he's presenting, and I'll just interject, or if he'll pause and ask if there are any questions periodically, then I'll bring anything forward that you all have. So please use the chat. Please share with us what you need to know. This is for you. We want to make this as useful for you as possible. So let us know about that as well. Okay, well, I'm going to get out of the way now, except when I need to jump in and be you all, and turn it over to Jacob, who is our guru of all things website in the conference. So Jacob, take over.
Thank you, Michelle. Again, my name is Jacob Turner. I am the Web Developer and Communications Liaison for the Arkansas Conference of the United Methodist Church. Big fancy way of saying I do websites. And so what I want to show y'all today is essentially basics of a website, a church website. What's effective? What are visitors looking for? What are members looking for? What are leaders looking for in a website? And now, today's going to be very much hands-on in terms of I'm going to be sharing my screen for the majority of it and showing you these different components. We will be using the Conferences Church website platform, which is based on Weebly for the demonstrations today. But please know that you can apply these concepts to any given content management system, whatever your website uses, such as WordPress or Wix or Squarespace and such. And if your church does not already currently have a website and you want to take what you see here and do it for your own church, but your church doesn't already have a website, please feel free to contact me. Our Conference Church website platform is open to all United Methodist churches in the state of Arkansas, and it is free. So what we offer is actually for free is what is Weebly's Pro plan, which typically costs $15 to $20 a month. So significant savings there. So with that out of the way, let me get this going really quickly. Let's see. I think I can share this window. There we go. So this is a test website I've set up for Anytown United Methodist Church. This is what, if you use the Conference Church website platform, this is what you would see when you log in. There's a couple of different things here, like insights, and if you scroll down, there's recommended apps. We're just going to cover the basics of what a church website needs. So we're going to go in and edit site. Okay, so as you can see here, I've set up a couple of things in advance just so we can have a basis to start with. So the first thing that you see here is, of course, you've got the title of the church as well as a short menu. One of the things I recommend first and foremost is what pages should a church website have? You need to have a page dedicated to information about your church, and this can be a historical record of things like that. You also want that page to have information about the staff. Now, what information that is up to your church, but typically what I see with churches is that they have at minimum a picture of the person on staff, their name, their title, and a way to contact them. whether that be email or a contact form. You can also add a short biography if that's something of interest to your folks. Another page that, of course, you want to have is ministries. What ministries does your church have? And you can either have that as one cohesive ministries page, or you can have a number of pages dedicated, one for children, one for youth programs, one for music ministries, and so on and so forth. It's dependent on the size of your church and the amount of information that you've got. For the purposes of today's demonstration, we're going to keep it all on one page. So you're just going to have a ministries page. Then I have a tab here for resources. And the resources link doesn't actually go anywhere. It's just a holder for these pages here. One is the calendar, which is a public calendar with all the events going on in the church. One is for live stream, because every church seems to have a live stream nowadays. Can't imagine why that's the case. But there's a page for that, and then a page on how to do giving online. If your church has a newsletter, this would also be a great place to add a page for that. And then finally, a contact page, which is self-explanatory. It's just a page that has contact information for your church and or a contact form. So the first thing that I think of when I think of what do people need to know about church websites is what's at the very front. What's the first thing that they see before they scroll down? And so here, for this instance, because I'm working with a fictional church, I have, this church is not fictional, but it's not anywhere near the Arkansas conference. This is a photo from United Methodist News Services. But something that really exemplifies ideally your church in a way that in a way that communicates something to the effect of, this is a church we want you to be a part of, with the we being the church itself. So ideal pictures that could be used in a situation like this: something of the congregation in action, whether that be in working on a missions project, or that is a big group photo as a celebration. Some churches do that around Easter or Pentecost and such. So something that just exemplifies the congregation of which you want, ideally, visitors to see and be a part of, but also to show to members as well, who what is the church. And in this instance, I've also put a text box here, specifically a title box, as you can see here, that just has this statement: a Christ-centered community where all are welcome. This just a statement that briefly summarizes what your church is about, something that really grabs people's attention. You can also use that space to highlight really important information. I've seen churches have our church is closed, but we're still meeting, or something to that effect is something that they would put here, and that's a perfectly acceptable thing as well. As we go down the front page, you'll see here worship times. Again, fictional, but the one thing I highly encourage churches to do is your worship time should be either in your header, this part right here, the header, or they should be right below it. Church visitors to your website, the one thing that they're looking for is, or the most important thing really that they're looking for is, when does your church meet? If you hide when your service times are, make it hard for them to find it, that isn't necessarily conducive to them actually being able to visit. So having your worship times front and center is a great idea. I would recommend also having maybe pictures of these services, or something that really illustrates each of them. I just have the times here, but in other church websites that I've seen, they will have pictures of the services, maybe a short description, and things of that nature in this area. And then just
Jacob, can I interject one little thing here? Another
sure.
thing that I would say that I ran into as a pastor, um, is if we didn't update not just our website, but the Find a Church on, which I know is not necessarily related to this, but it's a good time to point it out. The Find a
Hmm.
Church on the umc.org page. Sometimes that has outdated worship information, and I've had people show up at wrong times at church because that wasn't updated. So just wanted to kind of toss that out there. Um,
Sure.
initiative.
What I can do, that's actually, it brings up something really important, and that's that the Find a Church section on the United Methodist Church's website has finished. They were reworking on it, so it is now finished for churches to submit information again. I can show that at the end of this presentation, because yes, it is now working again,
Okay.
and is showing back up in Google search results, because it wasn't for a period of time in the past couple of months.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So, yeah, this is a good place to put worship times. It is also, if you have a special service, say that you have once a month on the 5th Sunday, you only have one worship service. It's a combined service. Make sure you put that information here as well. And think about what information is being put on your website. We'll come to that in a second when we update some of these pages about what's the best practices in terms of keeping content updated. As you scroll down the page, you see I put some stock imagery here, but this leads into something that I really want to encourage with churches, and that's that you have ample photography. That text is nice, but when you have walls of text and very few pictures, that people's eyes glaze over, and they do so very quickly. So while I have the stock photography here of this nice grain wheat field, I encourage churches to, with permission of the congregation, and especially with permission if you're using pictures of people under 18, that you have some sort of photography that exemplifies, again, the church in action, as we've sort of mentioned up here in the header. So yeah, and there's some more stock photography here, and then I just put in this text box with the mission statement of the United Methodist Church. And then yeah, down here at the bottom of every page is a footer. Again, I've sort of built this in advance, but I will show what exactly this looks like. This is a map of the conference office, although it's a little off center. I think I put it right in the middle of Flanders Smith. But this is a map, and one of the reasons I really like to have maps on church websites is that for people who are familiar with an area but may not necessarily know where your church is, it's a really helpful guide, more so than just having the address. And for people who aren't familiar with the area, the map is it's a necessity. But on the right-hand side here, I also have some contact information. So name of the church, the street address. If you have a separate post office box for mail, this would be a good place to include it as well. There's the fake church phone number, fake email, and then also some social media icons, which are built in the Weebly. They are down here under the More tab. There is a social icons box, and you can set these for different social networks. I have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Flickr, and YouTube, but as you can see in Weebly, there's even more options that I haven't selected.
So Jacob, can I ask just some kind of overall design things about this lead page?
Sure.
You mentioned the tabs at the top, and those are the ones that are pretty standard and recommended. I've seen some websites where they'll have 12 tabs across the top. Is there a kind of good number of tabs across the top to have?
I would say it's very church dependent. I would say have as many tabs as you feel like you can manage. So if you have 12 tabs at the top, if you can manage with good content and keeping it up to date for all 12 tabs, then go for it. But I would say from a visitor perspective, I would say think about your tabs from the visitor perspective first and foremost. While this website's designed for everybody, your visitors are going to be the ones that are most likely to potentially be overwhelmed by information. So that's the ways in which I would think about it. I typically like to stick to somewhere between 4 and 6 tabs and leveraging the drop down option. You see here I have 5, but there's certainly, I think, the potential to have more than just these. But again, I think it comes down to management and also what looks nice. If you have to have a more tab that has like 5 or 6 options that wouldn't fit in the main menu, then maybe you've got too many pages.
And also, yeah. I mean, I think another thing that we got to watch is too much InSpeak. Sometimes I'll see church websites and they'll have one, like if they have a mission statement that's like know, grow, and sow or something along those lines. Sometimes they do know, grow, and sow, which is great for your congregation that understands how that fits in your mission statement. But how clear is that to visitors, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's where I would think if you have a statement like this, or even if you have a good I think, yeah, the insider language, the insider baseball, so to speak, is definitely something you want to avoid. And I think the best way to get around that is to have a very clearly understandable to all, visitors, members, and leaders, a clear call to action, I think is the best way to understand that.
Okay. And then one other just general, is there like how much is too much content on that open space? Like you had a couple of pictures and some text in there, but I mean, how far down do you think people want to scroll?
So I would say your front page should have trying to think in terms of like a quantifiable, because it can be difficult again to quantify that information, but I think let's see, I would say that if you have to scroll to the very bottom of the page in order to find like some key information, like if you have, this is information about an event that's coming up, and this has information about this and this and this and this, and like you keep on going, and that's where I would say it's one of those things where you do have to feel it out.
Okay. There is a question.
Sure.
From some of the participants. The Maskels are on here too. I think they also get credit with David Fleming for for attendance, but they wanted to know if this current example is available as a template to use, or do they start from scratch?
So this is a template that I just developed. I can make it into a template, but I'd want to do some tweaking to really make it fit for a template. With every church website that we in the conference office have assisted with so far, it has been either starting from scratch or a refresh of an existing website. Part of the reason that I haven't really made a template before now is because I'll just show this to you very quickly. At least with the Weebly platform, there's a wide variety of templates built in. They all look different, and I don't want to make churches ascribe to a specific look because there's a lot to choose from. Okay. But there are ways in which I think we can take this example and make it into to something that churches can reuse in the future. So that's something we will work on putting together after the conclusion of this webinar.
Okay.
Are there any further questions about the front page, the home page?
I think we're good.
Okay. So now we'll actually get into building a couple of pages here. As you can see, we've got a couple of tabs across the top. So we'll start with the About page. And all of these pages I've left them blank so that we can actually build some of this information here together. Again, you'll want to get this information from your own church, your own history and such. So we're not going to be typing out like tons and tons of sentences. I'm just going to kind of give you a brief overview of good content to put in. So for those of you who use the Weebly platform, again, it's just as simple as there's a text box here. You drag it and you drop it into the page, and then you click here to edit. So just some information about, the Anytown UMC's, mission is to blank, and the church's vision is to blank. You want to sort of have this basic, like, what is your church, what does your church stand for? What is your church doing in the world? What is your church's mission? That's sort of some of the prioritize the key information for this About Us page. But you also want to have information maybe about, like, Anytown UMC was founded in blank because blank. And that can be, the church was founded by some of the first settlers in the community that you're in. It could be that it was founded in the 1980s as a mission congregation that's grown with a new neighborhood. There's, a wide variety of reasons for churches to existing in the world. And to sort of give a little background, is good in terms of helping people feel a little bit more comfortable with the congregation because they know the sort of the background of the congregation itself. Again, you might want to avoid insider language here as much as possible, but also recognizing that there may be a little bit of insider information just because there's only so much you can communicate in these sentences to someone who is new to a congregation. Finally, I mentioned also some staff information, and really the best way to do that, I'll give a brief demonstration. On the Weebly platform, there's a little feature that you can add in called team cards, and I'm just going to add that to this example website here because it helps build staff pages really nicely. So I'm just going to add that in really quickly.
So are all those apps free that they can just kind of pick which ones they want to add in?
So several of them are free, several of them are paid for. The ones I recommend the most are the ones that are actually directly made by Weebly. I'll show those really quickly here. You can do tables. Some of the ones that I use are the team cards, the tables, and the FAQ section. Those are some of the apps that I've seen used in several church websites. For this example, we'll be using the team card one, and I'll show sort of why I like using this for church websites. Because if you pop that in there, it creates this nice looking block that you can put in some information. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to add a photo. I think there should just be a picture of me somewhere on my desktop. Maybe. Actually, maybe not. Well, I thought I had a picture of myself. Oh, we'll ignore that for now. Okay. At the very least, I can show you how this works. Put in my name. Hi, communication.
What? You gave yourself a...
This is a church. So I'm not in trouble.
Oh,
with
right,
Amy.
okay.
I'm not taking over.
I was
for
like,
Amy's
I'm telling
position.
Amy.
This is purely an example. But so to show what I did there, so you see I put in my name, I put in that I'm communications director here, and then if you click down here, you can see that there's a button, and you can put in some information about this button, like changing the text. So I can put contact Jacob, and then I can set this button with a link. Click here, and I have these link options. I'm going to choose email. jacob.turner@arunc.org. And there we go. We have this card here that has me on it. But it makes it really easy, again, to just put in a whole bunch of staff members really quickly. And again, if you choose to do biographies, you can put a text box right next to it, because Weebly allows you to put things next to other things. And then I can just make this a little smaller, and there we go. And put in some text here, or I can put a whole bunch of these cards right next to each other with the different people in their positions. So that's really the basics of your About page. You want to keep this relatively simple. It's not something you're probably going to be updating a ton, but you want to have the most recent information on it. And speaking of updating, the conferences church. Go ahead.
Can I ask just a quick, there's a couple of questions about the About pages. Do you want to take those now, or do you want to continue on? I'll give them to you in a minute.
Let's go ahead and take them now.
Okay, so one person said that they'd combined their home and About pages, since when they did their About page, it was basically the same thing as some of the stuff they had on their home page. Should they keep them separate or leave them together? What are kind of some pluses and minuses on both of those?
So if you combine them, that can be, it's a case of, some of that information will be duplicate information. But the reason I suggest having them separated is that your About page is one of the few pages that I actually recommend being slightly more static in terms of the content that's on there and how often it's updated. Whereas your homepage should always have the most recent information about your church, events going on, new ministries being celebrated or coming up, and things like that. That should live on your homepage. And if that makes your homepage shorter, then arguably that's fine. It means that someone will do less scrolling, and they'll be doing more looking at the various pages of your website, rather than being overwhelmed with information on the front end.
Right, and I think you also mentioned that the About page could have a little bit more insider information, like your history, church's history, and that sort of thing too. So, yeah.
I would say, the area where there can be a little bit of duplicate information is that the home page and the About page may both have the mission statement, for example. So that could be an example of some okay with duplicate information. But yes, you do bring up a good point in that whoever sent in that message, you do bring up a good point. You do want to reduce duplicate information wherever possible. And I think that, you can do that and also separate out the pages in such a way that people feel like the information is not overwhelming. Because ideally, you want to divide these up into bite-sized chunks that people can easily digest and understand. Were there some other questions?
There was actually a question about a homepage question, and then there's a overall question. But do you want to talk more about the About page, and then is there anything else to note about that one? And we can back.
Well, so I think with the About page, we've sort of covered the content that's best to have on there. The one thing I was going to mention was kind of what I touched on in the previous question is this is a page that can be slightly more static. If you're not updating it constantly, that's fine. The conference's website policy is that you should update at least one of the pages on your website every 3 months. That's sort of the ideal. You don't want tons and tons of outdated information on your website, or people are going to think, oh, this is, if they're not keeping their church website up to date, then I have no idea what's actually going on with their church. While you do want to keep certain information up to date, this is one that you can leave a little more static. What was the question on the homepage? I can answer that really quickly.
What about slideshows on the homepage? Any recommendations on those? When to use them, I guess, and how to use them, and that sort of thing. What?
So I would recommend. It depends on how your website front page is structured. In this instance, I would probably take out this stock photo right here and make this a plain white background, and then use the slideshow module right below it to have either what I've seen some churches do is they'll take their announcement PowerPoint that they already make, turn them into images and then just put that on the front page. For churches that really do a good job of making those in advance. Some churches I've seen where they'll just put in a couple of announcements. If they don't do that, they'll just put in some announcements for things that they are currently doing. I've seen both, and I think both work well, given whatever the context of the church may be. So that would be what I'd recommend there. I would also say don't overwhelm it with photos. The more photos you have, the longer it's going to take to load the website, and in areas with lower broadband capabilities, if your website takes forever to load, people are going to move on. And they'll move on relatively quickly as well if your page is taking a while to load.
Yeah. By the way, if anybody needs to know how to make an image out of a PowerPoint slide, if you go to the website basics, no, not website basics, but basic video course, and you look at editing using Premiere, I demonstrate how to do that in that course.
So for right now, we'll go on to ministries, and then with the overall questions, we'll take those towards the end.
Okay.
But for right now, just to make sure we're keeping on track, we'll go ahead and finish out the rest of the pages. So in the Our Ministries page, it is very dependent on what ministries your church has, but typically what I would suggest is, have a section on children's ministries, have a section on youth ministries, and this is, again, if your church has these particular ministries, United Methodist Women, United Methodist Men, section for Sunday school, Bible studies, or small groups. Some churches have one, some churches have multiple, some churches have all, that have those divided up in the sections that work best. And then also missions and outreach. So what you want to have in each section, I will demonstrate this with children's ministry, is our children's ministry program. Sometimes they have a name, so we'll say.
On the frogs. Oh.
The frogs?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's for fully relying on God.
So the frogs, fully relying on God, meets every Sunday in room 203. Between the 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. services. I'm just making up this information, but this is sort of what you want to think about. Each section needs to have these pieces of information. If the ministry has a name, call it that. If it's an acronym, put what it stands for. Put what time it meets, what room it meets in, or what day, what time, what room it meets in, and what the purpose of the group is. So this is maybe children will be doing education, or in this class, children will be doing learning through the art of storytelling, or whatever it may be for your particular instance. But these are sort of the pieces of information that you want to make sure that people are aware of. Time, date, location, purpose, name, and things of that nature, and any additional information that would be important. So for example, like a Sunday school Bible study small groups, if you have a class that's reading a particular book, you might want to include that currently this Sunday school is reading this book, or our Bible study is currently covering the Paul's second letter to the Corinthians. So having that information there as well, it helps to, from a visitor's perspective, if a Sunday school is reading a certain book and that person's like, oh, I know that author, that might be a class I'm interested in. That can help people get integrated into the church a little easier when they have that information. But that being said, this is one of the pages you want to make sure is always up to date no matter what, because Bible studies begin and end really quickly. Classes will disband, new classes will meet. Pastors who have not been appointed to church in 10 years that are still being shown as the point person for a ministry does not do well for your church, especially if they do try to reach out to them and the pastor's like, I don't know what it is, or worse, that email address doesn't work anymore. So this is a page you definitely want to make sure is updated. This is also a page where you want to make sure you have good photography. Again, being mindful of taking pictures of people under 18, that's a whole separate topic. We'll not get into that today, but taking pictures of Sunday school classes that are meeting, or group photos of these classes, or some sort of photography that helps people put a visual to the content that you're talking about, and also breaks up those walls of text that can exist when you have all this information that you want to communicate to people. Do we have any questions on the ministries page? Nope. Okay. So going from there, we have these resources here that we've talked about. The calendar page, the reason I have this one in here, and I'll leave this blank, but I'll show how it works, is one of the nice features about Weebly is that you can put a Google Calendar, or if your church management program has a calendar that's built in, you can use that. But you can use these in your website using this block here called an embed code. If you put that in there, Google or whatever your calendar software may be will give you a code that you can put in the page by clicking on edit and then pasting one in. Where you can find that in Google Calendar, I'm trying to think. I actually can't show mine because mine's not set to public. But I can show you, because I've looked this up before. No, yep. That there are some instructions here. Yeah, if you just search Google Calendar embed and you're looking for the one that's add a Google Calendar to your website. If you follow these instructions right here, you can take the code that Google gives you and put it into this embed block right here. And that will allow you to not have to maintain multiple calendars. And it also allows you to quickly communicate events by telling people, hey, take a look at our calendar, see what's coming up for the week. So that's really all you want to have on that page. You want to keep it as simple as possible so you just have that information there. Any questions on the calendar page?
I don't have a question about that. Well, wait. It says there was a question about the ministries page, but I want to ask a question from here because you had the drop down. Could you show how you build a drop down? Because you had those pre-built. You had calendar, live stream, and giving pre-built. How would you add another page to a drop down like that?
So if you're in the Weebly platform, you'll see here that there's this tab that I've not been talking about called Pages. If you click on it, you see that these are all the pages that I've outlined here. There was I was actually going to create the newsletter page and put that in here. So I'll go ahead and do that now. If I create a page, I'm just going to create a standard page. I'll call it newsletter. You can see here that it added it to the main menu bar. But if I want to put it under this resources tab, then I just hover over it until I see those three dots that are right there. And I click and drag it wherever I want it. So right here, I'm going to put it under live stream. And now it's gone from my menu, but if I hover over resources, I can see that there's a calendar, live stream, newsletter, and giving. We'll come back to this newsletter page because then I'll show you how to build a page in Weebly from just scratch, but that's how you add the page itself.
Okay, and that does actually tie into on the ministries question. She said, when do you need to separate ministries out into separate pages?
I would say separate them out when you feel like if you've got more than 2 paragraphs of information per tab here, per section rather, that's when you want to think about splitting them off in the different pages. One of the other things that I've seen is that churches who have multiple people with edit access to a website, sometimes it'll be their communications person, but it'll also be their youth director, their children's director, their music director, and people, you know, all those sorts of people. That's when they'll split it off in the different pages and then say, hey, you're responsible for keeping up the page that's related to your area. That would be a good time to also separate out pages, because it prevents people from accidentally editing content on a page that's not related to their area of ministry. Those would be instances where I would separate them out. But if you've got a whole bunch of pages and they've all got 1 to 2 sentences on them, that's when you want to think about consolidating them into one ministries page. It makes it easier to maintain, and it keeps people from having to click around for what ends up being just a little bit of content. There any other questions?
Nope, but just to let Melissa and I scale, I'm holding on to your overall question. We'll cover it towards the end.
Okay, so the live stream page is also one that I pre-built, just because I wanted to sort of show a couple of things here. So I have, you know, when you're building a live streaming page, especially right now, you want to indicate what times the live stream is, or what times the live stream will be, and you know, where you can find them. In this instance, I've created this button that says Watch Live, and you can see it's not necessarily linked to anything. It's just a demonstration here. But I'll show you here. There's a button again. There's the button tab. I want to add a tab, or button rather, for past live streams. So I drag it right there, and I'll set this. Move these. Set it to past live streams. Past live streams. And then I'll move it to the center of that column. So now I have these 2 buttons, Watch Live and Past Live Streams. So I would have to edit this sentence. You can watch the live stream by clicking the Watch Live button, or you see there, I changed the sentence slightly by just editing that existing text box to add in this content. So that's with the live streaming page. Also, one of the things I will note is some churches will use this embed code block and put in the embed code for their live stream. If your software supports that, which unfortunately Facebook Live kind of supports it, in that you can add an existing live stream, but you cannot add a new live stream until you actually create it. So you'd have to be pretty quick on the draw there to get it on your website as well. But you can do so using, again, this embed code block here that we previously talked about. But yeah, that's really all there needs to be for the live stream page. That's one that also can be kept pretty simple, but also, again, keeping in mind what times you list on that live streaming page, and making sure that those times are accurate for whatever your church may be doing at that time. Any questions on that? Okay. So we'll go to this newsletter tab. As you can see here, this is what a page looks like when it's completely blank and you're starting from scratch by adding a page in the Pages tab here. The way that Weebly works, and I actually do kind of like this because it gives you some flexibility, is that the title of the page, you can manually type in whatever title you want. So in this instance, I'm going to call it newsletter. But if I wanted to call it, say it's the church bell newsletter, I can do that. So you have some flexibility on what you do here. What I'm also going to do is, as you see here, if I click on the header, I can edit the background, replace the header layout, or I can resize it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over this blue dot to resize it, and I'm going to drag it all the way up. What I recommend for headers that you do in Weebly is that if you're using the same photo for every header picture on your website, then you just kind of want to resize it because people are going to know what picture it is. If you've got different pictures and you want to use those, you can do so by clicking the Edit Background button and clicking this Replace button to add a different image back there. Weebly makes it very easy to do that. For the purposes of simplicity, we're just keeping the same background on every page. With the newsletter, since churches do newsletters slightly differently, I'm going to show a couple of different things here. First things first, some churches do an email-only newsletter. In those instances, what I would recommend is putting in a text box that just has some information about the newsletter. Our church newsletter is emailed out every Wednesday. So on and so forth. And you can add in an embed code to put in the sign-up form that MailChimp or Constant Contact or whatever platform gives you, and you can put in a button to take a person to the latest newsletter or newsletter archive. And again, MailChimp Constant Contact gives you those links to put in. Some churches do a PDF newsletter. If your church is one of those that does that, if you scroll down here in the Blocks tab, you'll see here that you've got both Scribe, Document, and File. I've seen churches use Scribed Document, but for simplicity's sake, we're going to be using the File here. What you do is you just drag and drop a file block in, and it will allow you to upload a file, and you can just upload it there. What it will do then is it'll put the name of the file here. What I would recommend is maybe changing it to the month. So, for instance, when we upload this newsletter, it's going to be called April 2020 rather than church-bell_042020.pdf. Makes it a little bit more friendly. So in this instance, we're just going to call it April 2020. Finally, for churches that just do a printed newsletter, and it's mailed out every Wednesday, one of the things you can do is actually create a contact form for people to sign up. So you can put your contact form in here, and you see it creates this nice little form. So what we're going to do is we're going to take out this title block, but we're going to put in an address block. And what that does is that puts in physical address, and they also put their email, and we'll even put in a phone number for good measure. And they can also add a little comment, and they can sign up for your newsletter that way. The way that forms work, when you create a form, you will always want to go to Form Options, this blue button here, and set the email address. You can tell where the email address is in the form because it'll start with the word Phoenix. Just want to delete that and do, any town, unc@fake.email, and you can even say this is the newsletter sign up form. In addition to this, so we'll save this. In addition, as you saw on the home screen for Weebly that we showed, that there is where the statistics were. If you add a form to your website, there will also be a section for form entries, and you can look and see who's filled out the form by going there. Are there any questions on the newsletter page? Nope. Okay. So we'll get through these other two pages really quickly, and then we'll have time to take questions and things like that. So the giving page here, again, with online giving, very much like the live stream page, adding a text box in that has, these are the ways you can give. And for example, there are churches you can do online giving, but you also can say you can mail a check to blank. We also do text to give just text any town start to 55555 to get started. You can also give online by clicking the button below, and then you just drag and drop in a button, give online, and then put in whatever link you may do in here. If you have so in terms of giving online, there is a webinar. I'll plug this really quickly. There is a webinar on how to set up giving online that is on the conference's webinars page, arumca.org. You click on our resources webinars. It'll give you more information on how to do that online. Once you have that set up, there should be a giving link that you can just put in right there in order to get your online giving online. Any questions on that? Yes, there is a question.
It's actually about the newsletter page. So backing up, if they sign up for the newsletter on the page, it sends them out automatically as is added to a web page. So I think what she's asking is if they, Melissa, are you asking does it kick them out of the web page to sign up for it?
So if you're talking about a printed newsletter, you're going to have to add those manually to your mail out list. If you're talking about an email newsletter, your email provider, such as MailChimp, Constant Contact, should give you a sign-up form that you can use the embed code here in order to add them to your MailChimp email list or your Constant Contact email list, so on and so forth.
Okay.
The Weebly platform does not have email marketing built in, unfortunately. That is a feature they are working on. I will say that they have started rolling it out to their non-bulk user clients, which we're a bulk user client because we buy websites from them in bulk. So that's not a feature that's available to us, unfortunately, at this present time. But it is coming soon. So for churches that don't already do email marketing, I wouldn't, bank on it being ready like in the next month or two, but it is something they are starting to test and roll out.
And if you don't have MailChimp or Constant Contact, if you're just hand doing email lists, what happens to the data then?
So if you're just wanting to collect email addresses from people, then you can set up a contact form and it will contact you with the name of the person and the email address. So like in this example, if they're doing an email newsletter, you don't have to have their physical address. So this contact form, when it's submitted, will send that information to whoever email address is on the form, and they'll have to manually add it to a list.
Okay.
Any further questions on the newsletter or giving pages? Okay, we're gonna get the contact page finished, and then we'll take any final questions that y'all may have. So again, contact us. Oh, we can. My browser froze. Let me refresh the page. There we go. Okay. So we'll just move that all the way to the top. So this is, again, another page where you might have some duplicate information, so you can contact us at, and fill in your information. And it might be the same as your information down here in the header or in the footer. But again, you can also add that contact form to the right there. and put in, name, email, and comment, and it will go to whoever you want that email to go to. So that would be essentially how you'd want to have the Contact Us page set up, is just something to that effect. In fact, I'll just copy this. Just to show how it's duplicate information, I will just copy and paste it. So that is a very brief 55-minute overview of what content you should have on your website and how to do it in Weebly. Again, these principles that we talked about and the things we talked about apply directly to Weebly, but you can also take these and use them for any church website that you may have. If you're either looking to cut costs on your website or start a website in general and you want to use the Weebly platform, please get in touch with me. We can offer these for free to any United Methodist Church in Arkansas. Just contact me at jacob.turner@arunc.org to get set up. So from here, we'll take final questions and anything of that nature. I know that there was an overall question and we were holding until the end.
Someone did have a question on the contact form. She said she's confused on how to designate who, I said she, could be a he, but whoever it is confused on how you designate who receives the contact information from the contact form.
So you go into the form options, and it's that email address we talked about earlier, the one that starts with Phoenix. You clear that out and you set it to whoever's email address you want it to be. So that's one of the great things about contact forms in Weebly, is that you can have different contact forms end up emailing to different people. But yeah, it's the same as the email or the newsletter form. You can go in and set the email address to whatever you want it to be.
Okay.
Like that. Any other questions?
Yes. Let's go back and cover the general one. So someone has a multi-point charge and none of the churches have a website. Should she build a website for all of her churches or one church, or what would be the approach on that?
So this is the approach we take if you have a conference provided church website, is that you get one website for the entire charge. And that just, it makes it so much easier to maintain in the long run. And yeah, that's what we recommend. One website for an entire charge.
I will say, as a pastor who had a 2-point charge, ideally that's wonderful. And if your people are on board with that, great. If you have two churches that are not super happy at being yoked to one another, you may have to go with another option. And in that case, you really need to encourage them to take some ownership of helping you maintain websites if you have to do 2 of them. Or I would say maybe start with Facebook pages and work toward websites, kind of see which of your churches gives you more help and gets more enthusiasm behind it. That might, Jacob, you want to talk about the difference between having a Facebook page, just a Facebook page, versus having a website, and what the pros and cons are on each of those?
Sure. So it's as someone who does communications audits, what I tell people a lot of the time is it's very dependent on your congregation and your community. So if you have a congregation of non-Facebook savvy people in a community that's very technologically connected and such, you're going to have to use more than one platform just to make sure you reach everybody that could be a part of your community. Facebook is good for the up-to-the-minute information that can go out about an event or things going on in the church. It's got a robust live streaming platform, and it's free. It's a good place to start out. The cons, though, are that it doesn't act really well as a repository of information, which is typically what a website helps you do. It helps you be a repository, or have a repository of all the information that one person could potentially use concerning your church. So that's where it sort of falls flat. I have had churches that go entirely to using just Facebook, and it has worked for them. It's one of those things again where it's going to be really dependent on your congregation and community. If your congregation's on board and your whole community is Facebook savvy and they're not really in the websites, then yeah, maybe there's not a point in having a website. But that again, the decision comes down to what's going to work best for your community and your congregation.
And in those charge websites, she's asking, would she set up a different tab for each church? Is that how the people are typically doing that?
It depends. The two that I've worked with so far that are multi-point have been, they're both pretty small congregations, and so the ministries that they do are all joint, so they don't have a separate page for each tab or for each church, but rather they have the pages set up like this, but each page has say the United Methodist Women at this church meets on Sundays at 3 p.m., where the United Methodist Women at this church meet on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Or if it's a joint ministry, maybe it's the United Methodist Men of both churches meet Thursdays at 11 a.m. at this congregation. So that's how those have typically worked so far. If it's churches with different ministries, that's going to be something I would still recommend having the combined pages, but just indicating by page which church has which ministry.
And then someone asks how you build the web page before you go live.
So none of this is live. This website that I've created, this is all not live. The way in which it works with our conference platform is that everybody builds a website before it goes live, and then when you're ready for it to go live, you tell me and I make it go live, and then I give you permission to make live future updates and such. And that's just to make sure, so everybody gets to build their website and try out the platform before they commit to it. That's one of the great features about the platform that we use.
And you are kind of a shepherd in the midst of that too, right? You're there to kind of help them learn in that early stage, correct?
Yes. The way in which I've sort of done this is it depends on the church. That I've had, a couple of people contact me and say, I know Weebly, I just want an account. And so I give them an account, I let them run with it. If you say, I have no idea what I need to do, well, of course, we'll have this webinar now, but if, I'm available as a resource for questions, I can also point you in the direction of different things. So like, we showed off Google Calendar earlier. So if you're like, I need to know how to add a Google Calendar to my page, I can say, hey, you'll want to follow the instructions on Google's website, and then follow the instructions here on Weebly's website, which Weebly has a great support site as well that I've been able to refer people to when they have specific questions on how to do certain things in Weebly as well.
Hey, I also put Jacob's email address in the chat, so if anybody wants to make note of that, you can shoot him an email and he can help start this process for you. Any other questions from anyone? Jacob, you're getting lots of greats. This has been helpful.
Good. Yeah, I have not seen the chat at all. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen here.
So there's a question. If you have a website, you can set up the Weebly and we can work on it, and then when we're ready, you can switch over?
Yes, that's the process we've been doing for everybody.
Any other questions from anyone? We thank everyone for being here. We will do what we've done with all of the webinars up to this point. We will cut it and throw it up on YouTube in its entirety within 24 hours. So you'll be able to go back and check it out. Then we will also cut it up into bite-sized content and load it onto course. So you'll be able to access it there in its pieces. So if you just need to go back and pick up a little bit here and there on this topic, then you'll be able to do that there. We are grateful for y'all being here. We're grateful for the questions, and of course, we're here to help you in any way that you need. And we're just ecstatic to have someone like Jacob on staff who is so helpful at this. So thank you, Jacob, for your time and for your knowledge and for sharing. Thank all of the rest of y'all. You are blessed. We're in prayer for y'all, and we're here for whatever you need, however we can be helpful as we navigate these challenges of ministry. Keep an eye out for upcoming webinars. As I mentioned, we're going to have one with the United Methodist Family Health, where we'll talk about doing mental health first aid. Those are coming up. And then we're going to have one on how to relaunch your church. And I forgot, we're also going to look at, we're in the process of trying to figure out one on how to podcast. So we'd love to have you join us for any of those. And blessings for the rest of your day. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you all so much for being here. Yeah.